Hi everyone, welcome to today's WER webinar. I'm Liam Eagle, I'm the Editor-in-Chief here at the WebHost Industry Review, and I'll be moderating today's session, which is called Expanding Your Hosting Business with Cloud Servers. And it's going to include a presentation from Todd Mitchell, who is General Manager of Dedicated Hosting and Global Services at The Planet, and Carl Meadows, who is Senior Product Manager for Cloud Services at The Planet. I'll let Todd and Carl introduce themselves in a moment, and we'll jump right into the presentation. Before we do that, I'd just like to give you a little idea of how things are going to go. We're going to save some time at the end for a Q&A, but if you have questions, you can submit them throughout the presentation. Submit them throughout the presentation using the webinar controls. So if you'd like to, sorry, I'll keep an eye on those throughout, and if anything really topical comes up, I'll find a polite point to interrupt and put the questions to people. But we will save some time at the end for the Q&A, and of course, at the end, if your question doesn't get answered, if we get a ton of questions and we don't have time to answer them all, they're all recorded, so somebody will get back to you afterwards, and you can hear back that way. So without going on too much longer, I'm going to turn things over to Carl and Todd, and they can introduce themselves and get things started.
Great. Thanks, Liam. This is Todd Mitchell speaking. Thank you for joining us today. As Liam mentioned, sorry, we're just sharing the PowerPoint. So as Liam mentioned, we're going to be talking about cloud servers and services today. Carl's joining me. Previously, I've been with you guys on the first couple of webinars that we've done. First is talking about density around shared hosting business, and then the second one was really around how to attract more clients. So if you're interested in either one of those, you can find them on the WER's website under webinars, or you can find them at the Planet's blog, and recorded versions are there. So just a reminder, my name is Todd Mitchell. I won't be doing a lot of the talking today. Carl has done a great job launching our cloud servers. He'll take you through a bunch of industry information, different points of view, different ways of understanding the cloud and where it makes sense and where it doesn't. And so I really think he's the right guy. So I'm here to support him and ask any or answer any questions that you guys may have. So without too much waiting, I'll let Carl introduce himself, and we'll get started.
Hey guys, can I just interrupt for a second? We can see the skeleton of your presentation if that's a problem for you guys.
Maybe move it over to the primary desktop.
I mean, I think we can just see the PowerPoint. So if you click the slideshow button at the bottom there, you can probably. There you go.
Is that it? Okay, that's fine. We had dual monitor action going on, webinar, WebEx, or I'm sorry, GoToMeeting. Webinar didn't like it. So here we go. So, hi guys, this is Carl. So what we're going to go through today is, first we're going to spend a little time talking about how cloud fits in the hosting portfolio. We'll talk about some distinctions in VPS versus cloud, dedicated servers versus cloud, choosing cloud providers or technologies, sort of your decision criteria around that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Planet's recent offering, Server Cloud, and our reseller program associated with that. So to start at the very beginning, one thing that you guys probably are very aware of at this point is that cloud's being used as a very general term right now. It's being used to describe a lot of things to a lot of different audiences and customers like it's one thing, and it's really not. I mean, cloud is really an inflection point in the market more than it is a technology. The three major technology buckets that cloud are typically broken into, for those of you who aren't familiar with these terms, I thought I'd go ahead and walk through them so that we can be clear about them as we talk today, are infrastructure as a service, and this is really virtualization. This is customers getting virtualized servers where they have root and full admin access. That is the majority of what we're going to talk about today is infrastructure as a service platforms. when you think about Amazon EC2, when you think about Rackspace cloud servers, these are infrastructure as a service platforms. Platform as a service is in one step up the stack from that. That's where you're actually managing the infrastructure, and you're basically uploading an application to run on their platform. Platform as a service, you think Azure, you think Google App Engine, you think Force.com, Rackspace's Cloud Sites is an example of a platform as a service. We're not going to focus on them too heavily today. That's a whole other topic we could discuss on PaaS. And then SaaS, which gets lumped into the cloud discussion, which I think a little bit disingenuously, but gets lumped into the cloud discussion is, anytime you're buying software over the internet, which in a pay-per-use model. Really, though, what we want to focus this session on today is understanding how all of this cloud talk relates back to hosting and how it impacts the standard hosting product sets and where it fits and sort of where things are headed. So that's really the primary subject today, and I'm happy to take questions and address things as we go. So to start things off, I made the point a minute ago about how clouds are a lot of different things to a lot of different people. To illustrate that point, we think about cloud has been very popular with a number of different use cases. So one, key one is, big transitional workloads like big data projects, scientific grid projects. And these types of projects, customers would spend up huge amounts of computing resources to run a giant batch job. Could be hundreds of servers, and they may only have them for, a day, 6 hours, 8 hours. That is a very, very different use case than anything we're deal with in the hosting industry. So, but they call that cloud too. And the same goes for like demo and test environments where people are using this to test code. They're running it for a few hours and shutting it down. In the hosting space, we're predominantly dealing with customers' internet-facing assets or web businesses. Their use cases are very different than those. These are people that require a high availability. They're running their businesses on these platforms. They need to be up 24/7. They're running revenue through these businesses. Not typically hugely volatile in amount of the frequency of change if you look at the horizontal axis, but the vertical axis can be extreme because it can really depend on the size of our customers. A lot of our customers are going to be down on the low. They're not going to have a whole lot of change, or they'll start pretty small. But internet businesses can be giant, so it can scale all the way up and down that axis. But it's very different than, say, an infrastructure extension project where an enterprise is outsourcing their back office SAP system into the cloud. I mean, that's, again, not the type of customer use case we're talking about, but when you read about the cloud in the news, a lot of times we'll be talking about things like that that aren't really not relevant to what we're doing for our businesses. So some of this is pretty basic, but I think it helps to sort of set the framework for how these technologies play. If we look at the traditional hosting portfolio, right? Everything starts with shared hosting. This is your simple multi-tenant web hosting platform where you generally have hundreds of customers or users per server that you're doing basic web hosting, right? Then traditionally, where people will go from that is to VPS offerings, where virtual private server offerings, where they're basically a customer outgrows a shared hosting box, but they don't have enough volume or enough traffic or demand or budget to warrant dedicated servers. So what we do is provide them a virtualized multi-tenant platform. Each user then has root access to their own quote-unquote server, and you'll see between 20 and 50 of these per box. And then the next step up from that would traditionally have been dedicated servers, where the amount of performance and the cost is really dependent on the age and performance of the actual dedicated server itself. Anywhere from $99 to $400 or $500 for really high-end boxes. But each customer has their own box. And then up from that, you'd have your multi-server environments where you've got customers that have multi-tiered apps that require back-end networks, dedicated network devices like firewalls and load balancers, DAS devices, and you really have multiple servers per user. Now, most of our resellers probably play in the shared VPS and then the sort of the single server dedicated server environment, whereas all of the Planet's business is in the dedicated server and multi-server environment side. Now, so where does cloud fit in on this? Well, really, cloud-based infrastructure as a service will eventually, the end goal is for it to basically play over both the VPS, dedicated server, and multi-server environments. Now, where and how it's fitting in across the various providers differs. But what we're seeing really first is cloud-based servers are really becoming a replacement for a lot of the traditional VPS offerings. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. But the real goal for clouds is for these to be able to support multi-server environments and complex environments and scale from the initial small one-server virtualization customer up to once you're scaling out and scaling up to support huge workloads with private backend networks, load balancing, all the types of things you could get in a complex dedicated environment. But we'll also talk about how, in truth, it's going to be layered on top of and working complement to dedicated servers. We think the best use of the technology as it exists today, cloud will not actually replace dedicated servers because there's some things you just need dedicated metal for. And we'll talk about how these things work together and how they can be used inside of our portfolio as we go through. And all of this is at various stages of maturity as well. So, and we'll cover that as we go. So what is VPS? Isn't all this cloud infrastructure as a service? Isn't this just a VPS? These look a lot like a VPS. They've got a couple different features, but they smell VPS-ish to me. And in truth, they are. I mean, really, cloud services and infrastructure as a service is really just a VPS 2.0. I think really when people are doing distinctions and saying, oh, that's a VPS, that's a cloud, there's a cloud, that's a VPS, they're the same thing. Cloud servers is just an evolution. And typically you're going to pay some premium associated with it because it's typically higher quality infrastructure, it's more modern, and it has some additional features over your standard VPS. But someone like VPS.net, there's no reason why you couldn't call that a cloud platform. It has many of the same features as any of the clouds out there. It just started as a VPS platform and evolved, right? And that's really all infrastructure as a service is. Now, so then why don't you call it a VPS? Why are you calling it a cloud? Why are you trying to call it something it's not? We all know what VPSs are. I mean, I think that would be many people's common refrains. And the fact is that VPSs, the name VPSs through large swaths of the market is really tainted. It's not because of anything to do with the technology. It has to do with what we as hosters and hosting resellers have done to it. When VPSs first came out, and even today, there are a lot of people selling VPSs that are oversubscribing Virtuoso boxes like crazy. And what ends up happening is customers buy $10 VPSs, $5 VPSs, and they get really inconsistent, really crappy performance, and they think VPSs are awful. So as a marketing guy, if I came out with a new product as a VPS, it's toxic. I mean, it's not going to get anywhere. When really all clouds are is an evolution of the same technology. It's just being applied more smartly, and hopefully we're not making the same mistakes that were made with VPS with huge amounts of oversubscription. So then, what is a cloud then? Well, cloud is, like I said, is a VPS, but it's also, it can have any number of features. When you think in the medical terms about a syndrome, a syndrome is something that can have, 3 of 5 traits. If you have 3 of these 5 things, then you're considered to have irritable bowel or autism or something like that. But cloud is like that. There's not any one feature. Well, if it has utility billing, it's cloud. Or if it has an API, if it doesn't have an API, it's not cloud. It's become slightly more nuanced than that. I think that was probably what the market perception was, 6 months, a year ago, but things are evolving very, very rapidly. There's a lot of very viable cloud platforms that, by intention, because their customers don't care, may not have one of those features, but they still provide cloud benefits, which is why the term is somewhat fungible. So when I think about the actual features that are often associated with cloud, and anybody that has a number of these could credibly consider themselves a cloud, there'll be things like, off-server high availability storage, providing higher levels of redundancy than you would get from a traditional VPS. API interfaces is very key for automation. Being able to grow and shrink resources and upgrade, downgrade on demand. Utility billing was the sort of canonical cloud example, though I think a lot of us are starting to come to our senses about whether or not utility billing is right in all situations. Having the ability to do cloning and snapshots and image libraries. The key one, I think, would hopefully be that there's a very dependable performance and there's minimal oversubscription, though that's certainly not always the case on cloud platforms. And then having access to multi-server type technologies like load balancers and firewalls, private backend networking, and any sort of high availability or automated failover. Those are all very powerful features when people start talking about cloud servers that customers may assume. Now, one thing that I didn't put on the slide that I probably should have, one thing from a myths perspective, a lot of the market, and even I think some of the practitioners in the market, a very common misunderstanding about infrastructure as a service is that it's grid computing, or is that it's high availability, that it is in essence high availability, and somehow that the server itself is redundant. That is not true of any cloud that I know of, any infrastructure as a service provider. So these are not grids. They are individual virtual machines running on a server somewhere. If that server goes down, that virtual machine will have to be restarted. Now, you can use load balancers and you can create your own redundancy on these platforms, and I think that's desired in a lot of cases, probably not for reselling, but it is certainly desired in some cases. But the cloud is not in any way inherently anything more than a virtualized infrastructure as a service, is not anything more than virtualized servers. So it's not some magical new technology, and I think that that's something we should all be very clear about. It's very cool usages of technology that's evolved, but it's not something completely different than virtualization.
Hey, Carl, can I ask you a question now?
Sure.
I know you were saying that because the term cloud is fairly broad and can be applied to a lot of places, it's pretty easy to call just about anything a cloud.
Right.
Is it possible to draw a line and say that isn't a cloud? Is it? Can you think of?
I think it is, but in truth, I really think that the term cloud is going to sort of wear out its own welcome and its own time. I think that it's cloud as a term has been good for the market, but cloud as a discussion of technology is next to useless. So attaching things to cloud for marketing terms and get people interest and to package products, I think is viable. But anything other than that, it's just semantics, and I think it just probably creates more noise. I think that ultimately you need to look at each platform and decide whether or not it has the right feature set for what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I've actually got a question from an attendee here that might be really useful at this point too, which is
okay.
I guess they're just sort of asking if what you're saying is that a cloud is like a container or something that connects VPS servers together into operating together as one infrastructure.
So yeah, that is what I think is sort of a common misinterpretation. I mean, cloud really is actually a VPS platform that just has more features and is may or may not have a more redundant architecture supporting the platform, but infrastructure as a service inherently is just a virtual machine that's running on a server somewhere that has its data stored somewhere. Now, there's a number of features that can be grouped around it to make it more highly available, such as if there was a hardware failure, maybe they have automated failover and the server boots up somewhere else. But it's not like two linked VPSs running in some sort of grid mode or anything like that. It is a virtual server, just like you could run with Zen or KVM or VMware on any server. It's just the platform and the stack of features and automation around those things is really what the cloud is. Does that help clarify it?
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. So it's not the distinguishing features are that it's not a physical server necessarily, and that has a few models for provisioning and a few models for billing and a few models for sort of usage monitoring.
Yeah, and I think that there's it's easy for people to get confused because they'll hear something about, like, say, Amazon S3 that is keeps multiple copies of someone's data. And S3, for those of you who don't know, is their storage platform. Whereas EC2 is not that. EC2 is a virtual server platform that's running a single instance somewhere. Any redundancy of those servers is totally each user's responsibility, right? It's not. There's nothing replicated or redundant about Amazon EC2 at all. Every instance is completely on its own. So. I don't want to necessarily beat that horse to death. But
I was just about to suggest that maybe questions about the specific nature of the cloud can be taken offline sort of after the fact.
Sure. Yeah. So then the next logical place to go is, so this is a virtual server platform, and it's really an evolution of VPS. So it's typically a more feature-rich version of VPS with some slightly different billing models. So when does that make sense versus dedicated servers? Well, so there's some rules of thumb, and these are the similar things that I train the sales reps here at the plant, because when we have customers coming to us, we're trying to help them make the best decisions too about whether or not a virtual platform or a dedicated platform is right for them, since we sell both. But really, cloud servers obviously start smaller than dedicated servers. You're slicing up a CPU, so if somebody they've outgrown shared, but they don't really need their own server. I mean, modern servers have gotten more and more powerful, while most customers' websites have not gotten more and more demanding in an exponential fashion, right? So a lot of customers, while they need their own server and they've outgrown shared, they probably don't need their own box. So dedicated cloud servers you can actually slice up more. Often as well, the cloud would be one of the cheaper ways to get access to just RAM. If a customer doesn't need a whole lot of CPU, but maybe they need 4 gigs of RAM, a cloud can often be a cheaper way to go. Customers that desire or need rapid provisioning, being able to upgrade and downgrade the same box without having to go and crack the box and schedule downtime or anything like that. Cloud provides those types of benefits. And it's really designed for single customer web or application servers. In the reseller world, a lot of people are coming to us looking at it as a replacement of legacy VPS products. You might have seen there's an announcement just yesterday that SiteGround, one of our larger resellers, standardized on our cloud platform as a replacement for the VPS that they have been selling. So when dedicated, though, that sounds like compelling, but there's still, and there always will be, with the current technologies that we have available to us, a need for dedicated. The biggest one is really disk, and it's related to IOPS. The problem here is that a lot of customers don't necessarily know what their IOPS requirements are. But so anything that's going to, like databases that are very latency, very sensitive to latency, and or requires lots of writes. There's a lot you can do on, some clouds do a really good job of reads. We'll talk about that later, not all. But there's a lot you can do to accelerate reads through, SSDs and caching technologies and stuff like that. But there's not a lot you can do with writes. And multi-tenant platforms, you're going to hit a limit for what you can write to it, successfully. And the economics and the amount of money people put into these platforms are going to be a limiting factor. It doesn't make financial sense for someone to build a cloud platform that could support every customer writing at the same speed they would with a DAS with a bunch of SAS drives So the typical rule of thumb that I use, and that it seems to make sense to most people, is that if you would have bought if you were buying this as a dedicated box, and you wouldn't have been able to support your application with just a SATA drive, then cloud's probably not right for you. You probably need to go with a dedicated box, because you're likely, if you were looking at SAS drives, you're looking at SAS drives in a RAID configuration, or you're looking to really accelerate performance through with like a DAS and a lot of spindles or anything like that. You're not going to consistently get that performance economically from any cloud that I've seen. You may be able to jerry-rig something like that on certain clouds where you're to try to get the disk performance you want, but it's not going to be economical for you to do it. When you can just go buy a dedicated box and throw some SAS drives in it, it's typically going to be cheaper. And you have more consistent performance, if that's what your concern is. A dedicated server still, in most cases, you have a lot more flexibility about what you can do with the network, what sort of appliances you can have, how you do network security. There's a lot of limitations, and it's going to vary from cloud to cloud about how the network's configured and what sort of network appliances you can couple with your cloud application. Whereas in a dedicated server world, you can get a private cabinet if you want, and you can configure it however you want. So there's a lot more flexibility there if that's a concern. I mentioned before, if cloud, from platform to platform, you may see lots of variance, but even the best cloud platform is still a multi-tenant platform. And so there's still some variability in it, in that there's other people sharing the same pipes, there may be other people sharing the same disks. So if your application is really sensitive to variability, dedicated servers is the way to go. And the one that I think a lot of people don't really realize is that really, if you're trying to maximize server performance for your dollar, it's going to be dedicated servers every time. So what cloud is really great at is smaller environments and scaling rapidly, scaling up and down, better optimizing components of your environment to match demand, such as like RAM or disk. But dedicated, if you're really looking for raw horsepower for the dollar, is always going to win. So like when Todd gave his talk on shared hosting and how to optimize shared hosting environments, I'm pretty sure he didn't recommend you deploy it on a cloud server. It's going to be much more economical to deploy shared hosting, which is on dedicated boxes, which ties into the next one. If you're looking at any sort of multi-tenant environment of your own offering to your customers, you need to be on a dedicated box. So if that's shared, if that's you running your own VPS platform or you building your own cloud platform, you need to run that on a dedicated server also. Okay, does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. So then the next step, though, is, so I understand sort of where cloud fits in and when I should do what, but which cloud? And this is one that you really got to make your own decisions, right? And the first thing that you need to determine is, based off of your business and off your customers, what things are important, what things you want to pay for, and what things don't you want to pay for. The platforms out there, they may all at first blush look very similar, but there are actually some very significant differences across them. And so, first decide what's important to you, build some sort of matrix, and then go look at them. But the areas that I would consider putting in a matrix, first one is really, what is the cost model? Cloud has been often directly linked to utility billing being a primary requirement. As a hoster and as a hosting reseller, when we were building our cloud platform, I did a lot of surveys and talked to a lot of resellers and our customers. Utility billing was about the last thing that most of them really wanted, and it was actually for very good reason. There's no utility billing leads to more complexity, leads to uncertainty, and a lot of variability. And also, there's a premium associated with something that you can turn off at any time, or scale, turn off at any time. Whereas a standard monthly bill where you've got customers that are running 24/7 applications, a standard monthly bill that that includes 95% of your billable items, so that you're consistently paying the same amount of money and can build your own model on top of it, is really key. It's really difficult to build a model on top of that you're going to resell on top of a utility billing model that your usage may vary widely. Some of these utility models have very, very granular costs that may radically impact your billing, such as billing per IOP, or most of them include absolutely no bandwidth. So when you have no bandwidth included, you're typically paying a real premium for the bandwidth that's used, and it can make for big variances in bills. And you're basically paying after the fact, as opposed to planning for paying a month in advance. It seems nice that, well, I only paid for what I used, but it's often a lot better off if you go, this is what I'm going to use this month, and this is how much I budgeted for, and this is how much I'm paying, and this is how much revenue I'm going to get off of that investment, as opposed to how much resources did my customer base use last month? Wow, $10,000. That kind of sucks. I had to only plan for 7, right? So the cost model is a key element to look at, and whether or not the provider can meet a model that makes sense for your business. The second thing that you should really look at is, where is the storage? A lot of clouds actually run on local storage, which is basically, it's just a server that they probably put RAID 10 and a bunch of drives on, and then they just cut it up for all the each virtual instance gets some portion of that disk. It offers pretty consistent performance, and there are some benefits to that. But what it doesn't offer is, if there's a problem on that node of any kind, then the customer is down until you can get that node back up again and can move the storage, their image, over to another server. So it has less reliability or availability, whereas some clouds are actually built with off-server storage using a SAN or a NAS, where the actual compute and the storage are separated. So if there's any problem on the compute node, the host, the customer's disk is all highly available and can immediately be accessed from any other host. So if there are, this is hardware, there are problems eventually with everything. In the event that there is a hardware problem, the customer could be up and running again in as long as it takes to reboot the server, as opposed to as long as it takes a data center technician to go out there, crack the box, and figure out what happened. So that's a key difference. So look at whether or not the platform is built off local storage or some sort of off-server storage. The other thing to understand is, what is their subscription model? And this gets back to where I said where I think the VPS market kind of went wrong, was there was so much oversubscription that you ended up with very variable performance. So oversubscription and dedicated resources, one thing to understand there is all virtualized or cloud platforms are allocating a subset or cutting a server up. The difference is, something that's dedicated is you're cutting it up into equal parts, and you're not allowing other customers to enter into the part that's allocated to the other customer. Whereas, so you could be cutting up a server 16 ways, and you're selling it to 16 different people. Oversubscription is, I'm cutting the server up 16 ways, and I'm selling it to 24 people. And it's sort of the airline model. I know that 95% of the time, not everyone's going to use all their resources, so everything will be hunky-dory. But there will be issues with oversubscription when you happen to get on a busy server and your performance suffers. And, you hear people complaining about that with Amazon all the time, that they got on a server and they go, oh, I got a bad one, and they cancel and they spin up another one. Oh, that one was bad too. They cancel, oh, good one. And the reason for that is that it's an oversubscription model. They happened to get on a server that was a bunch of other users were on that were heavily using. So they were not allocated dedicated resources. So that's something to understand with the platform. And I would go one step further than that. I would actually want to know what is the host server I'm actually running on, and what is the resource allocations of that per instance. Because some people may be running on very modern servers, but they may be cutting it up 64 ways, whereas somebody else may be running on the same platform, maybe cutting it up 12 ways. Most providers are very reluctant to share that information, and it's vital information for you to understand whether or not you're making a good investment, whether or not your dollars are being well spent. If the host won't share that information, it basically becomes up to you to actually run some benchmark tests, and probably several over a period of time to understand exactly what resources you're getting in the real world, and not what they're just telling you. You may also want to know what hypervisor. This can be relevant for various reasons. Now, this is largely the host's responsibility to manage these things, but it may be something that you care about. Zen versus KVM versus Virtuoso or Hyper-V or VMware. There's some limitations with some hypervisors, and if you're wondering why your VM costs so much, it's probably because it's running VMware. Upgrade, downgrade support. There's not a lot of consistent, everybody does this a little differently. I mean, everybody says, oh, you can scale up and scale down. But how, I think, is a key question you need to look at, and whether or not the host model works for you. Is it you scale up by cloning a server and setting up a new server? Is it that you can actually just allocate directly a little bit more RAM? Is your disk protected when you scale up and scale down? I mean, just sort of look at everything and make sure it fits with your model. A lot of cloud providers don't necessarily offer control panels. You end up licensing them yourself. So whether or not that's important to you, you should make sure they support the control panel you want. And then this is sort of a no-brainer, but just because it's a cloud doesn't mean the data center and the quality of the network matter just as much as they ever did. So understanding what the infrastructure quality of the data center and network are also dramatically impact the performance that your customers will see. How they do backup, or if they have any snapshot options. Obviously, if I'm a reseller, I really want to dig into the reseller program and what sort of discounts I can get access to if I'm successful. Not all cloud, a lot of people don't want to provide direct customer support for cloud because they're trying to keep their costs down. So they'll often relegate support to a forum or some nature like that. So really understanding what the customer support structure is, and it's something that you feel comfortable with. And then whether or not you have a need for an API or a white-labeled portal or something like that, that may be something that's very valuable to you, and make sure that your cloud provider can provide those things if that's what you need. So this is not necessarily an all-encompassing list. You may have some of your own, but and obviously you have to decide which are important to you and which you're willing to pay for, because it's all of these things have cost, and which one just lines up best for you. So now I'm going to be a little self-serving. I'm at 40 minutes already, so I've been educational for at least 37 of it. I did want to tell you guys a little bit about the platform we just launched. We launched it June 28th as our server cloud platform. Our approach to it was to really focus on web hosting use cases and web use cases, and resellers were a key demographic that we were considering when we built the platform. So what we had heard in our research was that having a very dependable platform that was highly available, that could offer very, very consistent performance was the key for most of our customers, because they were running production websites. They didn't care, the fact that it was really fast one day but really slow the next day was very, very bad. They would rather it be the same good performance all the time. So that's why we've opted for dedicated resources, no oversubscription in the model. We also opted to move all storage off server onto a SAN. We're actually using the Sun Unified Storage Platform, so that all the customer's data would be highly available, and in the event of any sort of server-side failure, the customer can be immediately spun up on other servers. The size of server, and you can upgrade and downgrade these sizes at any time, is really based off the number of virtual CPUs and the amount of RAM. So you could start with one virtual CPU and 512 megs of RAM, and then the next day you could just add up to 4 gigs of RAM into that one vCPU. And it's as simple as making an upgrade in the orbit, rebooting the server, and it's back up and online. By default, every server comes with 6 gigs of storage on the Sun unified storage platform. You have some additional upgrade options. And also, all servers include 1 terabyte of bandwidth, which, like I said, with a lot of cloud platforms can be sort of the hidden cost. If you were to look at, say, Rackspace's cloud servers, the actual server prices aren't bad, but no bandwidth included, and it's 22 cents a gig thereafter. So a lot of our customers we talked to that used it, that were web hosts, it was not uncommon at all for them to actually get back a bill that their bandwidth charge was 2 times what the compute charge was. So having bandwidth included was really important to our customers. So, and this is just a little bit of the benefits and a little bit how it's different. I'll just cover this pretty quickly. I mentioned that dedicated resources, so every customer has dedicated allocations of RAM and CPU. The redundant storage I touched on, upgrades. Provisioning occurs in about 5 minutes or under 5 minutes in most cases, so it's available nearly instantly. A little different from our dedicated server model in that it is a monthly billing, but we do offer credits back for any downgrades or cancellation events. So it really is a pay for what you use. So one of the big hassles that with dedicated servers is often that you're paying for the month, and so you have to sort of time your cancel at the end of the month. With this platform, anytime you're done with that server, you can just cancel it and you just get a credit back against your other servers. So it's a little bit more flexible for resellers. The bandwidth is key. A lot of clouds I mentioned they use bandwidth. Their prices are higher, but the reason is that bandwidth is a key driver of their revenue. So we use the same pricing schedule for bandwidth we use for dedicated servers, which is $80 a terabyte, which is going to be a lot lower than most cloud providers. And we treat and support these servers just like we would a dedicated server. So you have the same phone, email, chat support 24/7 for these boxes, no additional charge. And we do still offer management services on top of them if that's something that you're interested in. So a couple other just little informative charts. This illustrates a couple of the points we made before about cloud versus dedicated. If you look at the Planet's own fleet, and this is current up there, it doesn't include a couple of the newer Nehalem EX and Westmere chips, but it does include the rest of the servers are also currently in production on the Planet. This was done with a Unix bench 5.2.1 I didn't include the disk checks. This is just CPU comparisons. So you'll see that the 1 vCPU box, this is the entry-level cloud boxes, they start at $49, and the performance is about 80%, 70% that of a 3040 box, a dedicated Intel 3040. So you can actually get in much lower and have a very quite a considerable amount of performance for small workloads. But you see as it scales up, once you get up to the 4 vCPU and 8 gigs of RAM, you're at about $249. And there's a lot of dedicated servers out there that offer similar performance for better prices than that. So cloud, while it starts lower, it does scale up faster on a CPU basis. And if you're really looking to maximize performance, such as for a shared hosting platform, then you can see why dedicated becomes more economical by just looking at this chart. The next point I wanted to make was to look at disk. Disk is another key, and this is just showing you some real-world data. So this was done with Bonnie++, and with multiple runs were done. I think it was at least 5 runs on all of these, on average together. So you'll see here that now the Planet server cloud is based off of a Sun Unified Storage SAN that's fully spec'd out with SSDs and has quite significant caching. So if you look at in the upper right-hand quadrant, if you look at reads on a block level, the server cloud performs ridiculously. Actually, doing 561 megabytes a second. Now, the caching is doing that. And this real-world performance, we designed this for web hosts and web-based applications, which are often very read-heavy. So that's great. It's going to smoke pretty much anything out there. But when it comes to writes, when I talked about earlier about writes really is what's going to dictate when you go to dedicated, The write performance, there's only so much caching can't really help you a whole lot on writes. So Server Cloud looks like it's about, in these tests, is about 20% better than a SATA drive. I said a SATA is sort of the rule of thumb, but you look at some other platforms out there. Amazon does a pretty good job of replicating about a SATA level performance with their EBS storage platform. SoftLayer, which also uses a SAN, not so much. But it's really important that you look at that, and also I'd recommend really doing your own testing and determining which platform is going to be right for you. But this just gives you, this is just a case in point when I talk about, well, writes often are going to dictate your decision. You can see in terms here, if we threw a SATA drive, a SAS drive up here, it would probably score on the right side at least 9,000 K per second, right? And that's before you start chaining them together with RAID. So before we get to questions, I did want to just cover a couple little special offers for resellers for us. We designed this product for resellers. We have a volume-based discount associated with resellers that is applicable on this platform. As you do more volume, you get bigger discounts. We'll also, as you do more volume, will allow you to do things like completely. This is a virtualized platform, so we can really customize it to meet you. If you were going to drive volume on the platform, we would be willing to come up with custom packages that best suit your needs as far as vCPU, RAM, storage, bandwidth, specialized pricing. If our pre-existing packages don't meet your needs and you want to customize it, we have the ability to do that for you. Also, I encourage all of you to go ahead and take advantage of, we have a free month on Server Cloud via the promo that's in this slide. So, get out a pen, write down the URL. If you go to that bit.ly URL there, you'll get access to a free, 1 month free of a 1 vCPU, 2 gig of RAM server. That's $74 a list. So you can use it, try it, play with it. So feel free to write down that URL, knock it out. It's available. That offer will expire September 1st. And then we have our Partner Plus email there. If you have questions about the reseller program or want to get more information, please feel free to contact us, and we'd be happy to help you out. But I think with that, that's the presentation. I'd be happy to use the remaining time to talk about questions and do you guys.
Well, Carl, I have a few questions of my own, and there's some questions from the group that, or the attendees that I'd love to put to you since we have some time left.
Sure, absolutely.
And just to anyone else who wanted to submit a question and has been waiting to this point, please feel free to submit them while we're discussing here. And again, if something comes up and it doesn't get answered, or if you submit something and it doesn't get answered, you can sort of rest assured that these guys will get back to you by email after the fact. We're going to have a log of everything that was submitted, so there's plenty of opportunity to follow up. And what was that email address you had on screen there, Carl?
I'm sorry, I can back it up. It was partnerplus@theplanet.com is our reseller program. But you could also feel free to email myself or Todd. We don't have the emails up there, but it's T Meadows at @theplanet or T Mitchell @theplanet. We'd be happy to help you out too.
Okay, so I'd like to, before we get too much further, go a little bit more detail into how exactly, I got the impression, I think a couple of other people got the impression earlier when you were talking about if you want to sell cloud-based services to people, you have to build something yourself. But then at the end, I mean, you stated very explicitly that you have a reseller version of your cloud servers offering. So I think I'd love to have you describe what exactly it looks like to a reseller when they're selling your cloud servers.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. I didn't make that particularly clear. So yeah, we have our own platform that we've designed that you're basically able to resell cloud servers, and it looks a lot like just reselling. These are virtualized servers, but it looks and feels a lot like you would be reselling a dedicated server. There's more features and functionality available in Orbit as far as upgrades and systems management, but the same support and experience of a dedicated server. It's just a virtualized server. Now, the other option, as you allude to, is you could actually like buy hardware from us, or go into colo or something like that, and build your own cloud. So that's always an option. It just depends on what sort of investment you want to make and what sort of support commitment. If if you're buying cloud service from us, you're completely outsourcing the actual platform management. The SLA extends all the way up to the actual availability of the instance, so you never have to worry about hardware again, basically. It's our responsibility to make sure those images are up and running, and if we don't, we're paying credit. Now, if you've got the size and the aptitude and the skills to build your own platform, we have a number of customers doing that on our dedicated server environments today. We support hypervisors like Hyper-V and ESXi from VMware, and you can obviously run KVM from any Linux distribution, and then build your own stack. There's even some tools out there that you could look at if you were looking to do that yourself. You could license a cloud stack from someone like Parallels. They've got a cloud management platform that you could run, or you could look to there's some guys I actually really like, a company called Cloud.com. They've got their own open source cloud stack that you could look to build your own cloud with as well. So there's a number of options at your disposal.
We actually also have a very cool webinar we did with Cloud.com back when they were called VMOps, which is archived on the web.
Yeah.
Somebody actually has already attempted to take you up on your special offer, and it was reported back that the promo link wants payment at checkout. I just thought it.
Okay, so that's actually good. I'm very glad that happened. So that's a bug. I'd hoped that the web dev had promised me it'd be done before 2 o'clock, so I guess it's 1:54, so she still has 6 minutes to fix it and meet her deadline. The promo code is working. It's a display issue. So you could try to go back again in a few minutes if that makes you feel more comfortable. Hopefully the message will be corrected. But if you do go forward, you won't be charged the $59 or the $74 in this case. It's a display bug. But we'll get that rectified before the end of the day.
Sure. Okay. I guess somebody asked a question about the sort of perception on security in the cloud. Customers feel that a dedicated server is inherently more secure than a cloud server, and I guess this person wants to know what kind of security-related questions you guys field when you're selling cloud services.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very common question, and it's a big concern for people. The first thing I would say is important for any host with security in the cloud is that they have to be transparent about what architecture they're running, so that a customer can actually do some of their own research and determine whether or not they feel like that is a secure environment for the data. So, for example, we're virtualizing everything via KVM. The host is completely secured from any of the guests. The guests are unaware of the host platform. The network is completely segregated that all the storage is on, and the storage is on a SAN. So basically, a customer could actually go and research that. Now, the KVM doesn't have any open bugs associated with security that haven't been patched. We maintain and are responsible for the security of the platform. Each customer has their own VLAN, so that they're just like they would in a dedicated server environment. They can't sniff traffic from any other customers. So the actual environment itself is secure, but I think the key is actually the host being transparent about what the environment is, so that you can feel confident in that, you can research that, and make sure that you're comfortable with it. These hypervisors and the platforms associated with them are pretty mature technologies at this point. VMware wouldn't be in business, and nobody would run platforms on Zen if you could somehow transverse easily from the guest to the host or to the other guests. these are very, very, very popular technologies and well-baked technologies. So I think there's a lot of data to support that. It's just understanding what it is and how it's implemented. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think, the person was asking what kind of questions you guys get. So do you have sort of specific concerns that come up?
Yeah, the questions typically revolve around, access to data. And the customer's data in this case is actually a block-level device that the host is booting and the guest is seeing. So you can't actually go to the SAN and actually read the data. The data is just a block-level device that has to be mounted via KVM. It's a file. But really, the ultimate question is their data secure? And I think that the same issues with the cloud are present with dedicated servers, and it's really what is the security program that the host is using to secure the environment, such as who has access. Are they logging access when the technicians actually try to log into the server or view any of the customers' passwords, if they keep their passwords on file? Is all of that information logged? These are the types of questions you should really be looking at, because that's where a big part of the security exposure is the host that's managing this environment for you. Do they have the access they need to effectively manage the environment, and are they logging activity so that if there was a security incident, it could be traced back? That's really the crux of the security program that you need to be looking at, making sure that the host is not exposing all that information, and when they only use that information when they need it, and when they need it, are they tracking it?
Okay. Somebody wants to know if you can talk a bit more about the vCPUs and hyper-threading versus Xeon quad-core equivalents.
Sure. Yeah, I have some slides that I've used in my full-blown sales decks that I was trying to keep you guys from a full sales pitch. The vCPUs that we use on server cloud, a vCPU is really just a proxy for the amount of dedicated processing we use. Where the platform of the current generation server cloud is all built on dual 5520 Nehalem boxes, and each vCPU is basically 1/8 of that Nehalem. So a customer that has a 4 vCPU VM would have a quarter of that box. But the vCPU is really meant to just sort of be a proxy so that you can understand why I'm paying, when I get 2 vCPUs, I'm getting double my CPU allocation, and therefore that's why it's a little more expensive. But these are all dedicated. There's actually no oversubscription in the model. So the one vCPU, when you saw that benchmark score, scored about an 822 on the Unix bench tests I was running, whereas I guess you could go back to that slide. Yeah, you can see there the one vCPU is about equivalent of in a raw CPU performance terms. This is based off the Unix bench test without the disk test in it. Was about 70% of a Xeon 3040, whereas the 2 vCPU was a close equivalent to a 3060, and a 3 vCPU is a pretty close equivalent to a Pentium G when it comes to actual CPU performance. Now, performance will vary, of course, across architectures and across workloads. This is just the standard benchmark that I think a lot of you guys are probably familiar with, which is as good as a measuring stick as anything for broad spectrum testing.
Okay, somebody wants to know what speed the vCPU's core are running at.
They are, I mentioned it was a Nehalem 5520. They run at 2.26 gigahertz. So that's the CPU speed.
Okay, and somebody else wants to know if you're going to, if you're going to raise the limit on vCPUs past 4 at some point to 8 or more.
Yeah, there's no reason why we couldn't. We just initially were sort of targeting the sweet spot, what we thought was going to be the sweet spot with V1 of the architecture. If we see much demand, there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't go higher vCPUs per box. To be frank, what I've been seeing a little more demand, if anybody has questions or comments on this, I've been seeing a little more demand around people with low CPU requirements but high RAM requirements, where maybe 4 gigs of RAM isn't, they could actually use more RAM in a 1 vCPU box, 6 and 8 gigs of RAM for 1 vCPU. That's been, I think in practice there's more workloads are more RAM constrained than CPU constrained.
Okay.
There's no reason. It's a flexible platform. We can do whatever the market dictates. So, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to mention that we just sort of passed the 1 hour mark, so maybe a few more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
Okay, so somebody was asking, pointing out that you're using or offering the full version of cPanel rather than the VPS optimized version, which might use less memory or cost less. Can you just talk about that?
Yeah, that's something we do want to. We actually are going to implement the VPS version for both the reasons I cited. We initially were using the same provisioning system we use for dedicated servers. It's something that's on our roadmap. It shouldn't be too long before we can actually wrap that in.
Okay, great. And sorry, somebody asked earlier. Just to be clear, the reseller version of the cloud servers is it a white label product? Can they sort of deliver their own name when somebody checks the IPs?
It's resold in the same way we do dedicated servers now. That the IPs aren't SWIFT. They would come to us, but they would actually also see their host in there as well. They would point back to the host and then us as the parent is, I believe, the way that works. So Todd can clarify that more if you want.
Yeah, so Carl's completely accurate.
Just unconfident.
Just unconfident, yeah. So he's completely right. We use the same model we do today for dedicated hosting, and as you guys are probably aware, we have several of the largest resellers who house with us. So they're confident in the manner in which we're providing service to them. For just standard web host who's looking to resell and expand their product portfolio, I think that we offer the right tools for that. Obviously, as Carl begins to roll out more of his roadmap and he does iterative releases, and certainly as we receive more feedback from you guys, we can reprioritize and move certain features in and out of releases and iterations. So if you take us up on the 1 month free, feel free to drop Carl a note with any feedback you have or stuff that you would like to see from a reseller perspective, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you guys on the phone or through email just to get a better feel for what you're looking for, because resellers are a big part of our business. We want it to continue to be a big part of our business. We want to do everything possible to make sure that this is the right solution for you and for your users. So give us a call, drop us a note. More than happy to talk you through some of the roadmap and where things are headed.
Okay, I guess one thing I was wondering, and I know we just talked about sort of that sweet spot that you envisioned for consumers of the product, and we've talked about you really building it around the idea of people reselling it. Who do you picture your resellers selling the cloud servers to?
I really think it's to people who've outgrown the shared environment, that are not yet ready or require dedicated or multi-server environments. So it's really, initially, I think for most resellers, it's a rip and replace for VPS. I've seen some resellers that offer both VPS and cloud, but I think that the distinction is too fine, and it's very difficult for them to explain to customers why one or the other. So I really just think it's an improved platform over many of the popular VPS platforms that people have been running for years, like Virtuoso.
Okay, so you're not necessarily saying that you're selling to people who want to get out of a VPS and get into a cloud server. You're just saying that somebody who might go with a VPS, for the provider, there are performance benefits and certain other benefits, and there's no negative connotation associated with the cloud, where there might be some associated with VPS?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. a platform like this, there's dedicated resources. The storage is actually all highly available. It's a much more redundant, high availability solution than most VPS environments can provide. So there's a lot of upside, and like I said, it's really sort of like a VPS 2.0 environment.
Is that kind of customer going to want access to an API, or are they just going to want to provision through a control panel?
API, I think bigger customers are going to want to have access to an API so that they can either fully automate the ordering and upgrade, downgrade provisioning process once they get to a sufficient volume. That is something that we have in the works and will be available this year. But it's for now we require people to do it through a control panel, and even for a lot of our larger resellers, that's fine. But obviously, an API is an important part that we've got on our roadmap.
Okay. I don't really have any other questions written down, and I think we've gotten through most of the users' questions. I don't know if you guys think this might be a good spot to wrap things up.
Yeah, it's fine with us. If there's any other questions that you have, we can answer them via email.
Okay, great. Well, that's about all the time that we plotted out for today's session. I want to thank everyone for attending and for submitting a lot of great questions. Of course, I'd like to thank Todd and Carl for a lot of great information, a great presentation. And before we go, I want to let everyone know that an archived copy of this webinar will be going up on the WER website sometime next week, and it'll be posted along with all of our past webinars at thewer.com/webinars and at the Planet's blog, which the URL for is
blog.theplanet.com.
Great. Thanks, guys. And everyone, have a great day.
Great. Thanks, Liam.